The prettiest piece of land on the whole listing is usually the worst ground on the property. That flat, green, level lot the agent saves for last, the one that makes your hand drift toward your pen, that is the one I walk slowest. And I walk it twice. Level and pretty and green, out in the country, is very often just wet, cheap dirt dressed up with a nice gait. A realtor walks you the pretty way. High ground, good boots, a dry afternoon in October when every acre on earth looks like a garden. I am going to show you the other walk, the cowboy walk. Low, slow, after a hard rain, on the ugliest day the calendar will hand you. That is the walk that makes the ground quit lying to you. And the worst of what a piece is hiding shows itself in about 60 seconds of it. Once you know what to put your boots on, buy the wrong piece, and the mistakes run into real money. A septic system on ground that chokes on it runs $3,000 to $12,000, and the average lands right around $8,000. A perc test, just to find out whether your ground will take one, runs $700 to $2,000 and climbs from there where the dirt fights you. A wet crossing you have to bridge to get your own truck home is a culvert and a load of rock every single spring. That kind of trouble stays hidden on a dry day tour with a man who gets paid the day you sign. Snad! All of it comes up out of the mud when you walk it the cowboy way. The things I walk are the things the ground will answer back. Every one of them. When you ask it right. The first thing I read is the flat itself, and the prettier it is, the harder I read it. Water has to leave a piece of ground. It leaves by running downhill. A piece needs some fall to it, some slope, or the rain that lands on it just sits there and soaks in slow. A dead, flat, level lot lies there with the rain on top of it. So it ponds, and it soaks the ground below to mush, and it stays that way for days after the high ground has drained and dried. Walk that level flat the morning after a hard rain. Watch for the sheen. A thin skin of standing water catching the light where the photos showed you green grass. Step on it and feel whether the ground gives under your boot like a sponge or holds firm. Push your boot heel in and pull it out. If the print fills with water while you stand there watching it, that flat is a bathtub with grass on it. Pretty in a photo, miserable to live on. That same soaked ground is the reason a house on a flat lot ends up with a wet crawl space and a sump pump running half the year. High water sitting a foot under your floor finds its way up. The ground was telling you at the surface if you walked it wet. Sloped ground has its own version of this, so keep your eyes down even when the piece falls away nice and dry. Walk the base of every slope. Where a hillside meets the flat, water that's soaked in up top comes seeping out at the bottom, and you will find a soft, green, wet band right along the foot of the rise. Build up the slope, above that seep band, never right in it. The next thing I walk to is the low corner. Every piece of ground sheds its water somewhere, and I want to stand on the spot where it goes. Follow the lay of the land downhill to the lowest corner of the piece and look hard at it. Some standing water down there in the wet season is fine and normal. Every place has a low spot. What you are checking is whether that low corner sits below your home site or whether your home site sits down inside it. If the pretty flat you would build on is itself the low corner, then every drop of rain that falls on the whole piece drains toward your house, your well, and your septic field. That is backwards. You buy backwards ground and you keep it. Rushes and cattails growing where you meant to put the barn are the ground telling you flat out. Those plants stand in water most of the year. Where they are thriving on your building site is a marsh that dries out for a few weeks in August and fools you. Standing water that sits and goes stale carries its own price, too. It breeds mosquitoes by the cloud all summer, and it sours a stock pond so the cattle turn up their noses at it. Moving water, or water you can drain off clean, stays sweet. A low spot that just holds and stagnates is a nuisance you will fight for as long as you own the place. The third thing is the one that costs the most to get wrong, and it hides completely from the road: the septic ground. Your ground has to drink your wastewater. That is what a septic field does. It runs the water out into the soil, and the soil has to take it and filter it down. Ground that drinks fast and clean handles a cheap, simple gravity system, $7,000 to $15,000, and done. Ground that refuses the water needs an engineered mound system, $15,000 to $30,000 and up, and on a bad enough piece, it can cost more than you paid for the land itself. You can read the ground yourself before you ever pay for the official test. Dig a hole a foot or two down, out where the septic field would go, fill it with water, then watch. If the water drains away in a few minutes, you have got sandy, hungry ground that takes a septic field easy. If it sits there for hours, staring back at you like a mud puddle, you have got heavy clay, and heavy clay chokes a septic system dead. There is a second half to this most buyers forget. The county wants a reserve area too, a whole second patch of good ground held back in case the first field ever fails. So you need the good draining soil twice over, in two places, both clear of the well and the creek. On a small piece of tight clay, finding that twice can be the thing that makes the land unbuildable. The county will make you pay for a real perc test done to their rules before they permit a build. That runs $700 to $2,000, and the ground either passes or it fails. Doing the cheap hole yourself first tells you whether to even bother writing that check. While you are thinking about the septic, think about which way the water underground is moving, because your well and your septic have to live on the same piece without poisoning each other. Groundwater flows downhill, slow, same as water on top. Whatever soaks into the ground up the slope travels down through it. So the rule the old-timers followed without a code book was simple: put the well uphill and upslope of the septic and upslope of the neighbor's septic too, so the water reaches your well clean before it ever passes under the field. Read the slope of the piece, and you place the well and the septic the way the ground wants them, instead of the way the lot corners happen to fall. The fourth thing I walk for shows up best on a cold, clear morning, and most folks buying in summer skip it: the frost pocket. Cold air is heavy. At night, it flows downhill and pools in the low bowls and hollows, same as water does, and it settles there and sits. A low bowl on your land is a frost pocket. It frosts weeks earlier in fall and weeks later in spring than the ground 50 feet uphill. It fogs in on cool mornings. It kills a garden at both ends of the season, and it freezes your water lines in a cold snap while the neighbor up the rise stays clear. That matters more than a garden if you meant to plant fruit. An orchard set down in a frost bowl loses its blossoms to a late freeze most springs, and a tree that blooms and freezes gives you no fruit that year. The old orchards sit on the side of a hill, up out of the cold sink, for exactly that reason. If you can walk the piece on a cold morning in spring or fall, go at first light. Look for where the frost lingers longest after the sun is up, and where a low fog lies in one hollow. That hollow is the cold sink. A fine place for a pond. A poor place for your house, your garden, or your trees. The fifth thing is the one people fall in love right past, and it strands them every spring: the access. Look at the spot you have to cross to get in and out. The dip in the driveway. The soft place near the gate. The little draw the road runs through. On a dry August afternoon, that crossing is firm as a highway. Walk it in March when the frost is coming out of the ground and the rains are running, and that same firm spot turns to axle-deep gumbo that swallows a truck to the frame. A piece you cannot reliably drive to in the wet season is a piece you are stranded on 4 months a year. Think past your own truck, too. The propane man, the school bus, an ambulance on a bad night, they all have to make that same crossing. Fixing it means a culvert, a load of gravel, sometimes a little bridge. Know that cost before you sign, because the seller will stay quiet on it. And watch yourself around a pretty creek, because a water view sells a piece, and it can also sink it. The flat green bottom ground along a creek is flat and green for a plain reason. The creek put it there, one flood at a time. That ground floods, and a house set on it floods with it. Before you fall for the water frontage, find out whether the piece sits in a mapped flood zone. The county keeps those maps, and so does the Federal Flood Office, and it is a free thing to check. Land in the floodplain builds under harder rules, costs more to insure, and gives the creek a standing invitation to your living room. Build up on the high bench, well above the high water line the creek has already marked for you in the driftwood and the silt. The last flood left you its record. Go read it before you trust the view. Before I get to the last one, walk the road past the neighbors, because they already ran the experiment for you. Look at their low spots. Is their yard ponding after the same rain that fell on your piece? Is there a culvert under every driveway on the road? And are they all running hard? What do their gardens look like? And where did they put their houses on their own ground? A whole road of homes built up on the rises, with the flats left empty and wet, is the neighborhood telling you where the dry ground is. The people who live there voted with their foundations. Then do the boldest thing a land buyer can do. Knock on a door. Ask the fellow how deep his well is, and whether the water is good, or whether it comes up hard and full of iron. Ask him what the road does in March. Then let him tell you where the water stands on his own place after a big rain, and watch which way he points. A neighbor who has lived on that dirt 20 years knows more about the ground under your piece than any listing, any map, and any well log, and most of them will tell you the whole story over a fence. Glad somebody finally asked. If a plain, muddy walk that saves you from an $8,000 septic mistake is worth your time, subscribe, and I will keep walking you onto raw ground like this before the ink ever dries. The last thing I read is the quietest, and it is the whole property at once. I look at where nobody ever built. The people who worked this country before you were sharp, and they worked hard. Where you find an old foundation, an old well, a line of old fence, a windbreak of trees somebody planted, that is where a person who had to live off this exact ground decided to plant himself. He read it hard, because getting it wrong could ruin him. So when I see a big, beautiful, level flat that sat bare for 100 years, I get suspicious. I think, what did they know that I have yet to figure out? 9 times out of 10 there is an answer, and the answer is one of the other things on this walk. It floods. It is the frost bowl. The water under it is bad or too deep. The old-timers walked away from that beautiful flat for a reason, and the reason is still sitting there in the ground, waiting on you to find it or step in it. While your boots are already muddy, there are a few more things worth eyeballing, and they cost you only the walk. Walk the actual boundary, all the way around, corner to corner. Find the survey pins or the old markers and see whether the fence line matches the deed line or whether it wandered off years ago. An old fence set 30 feet inside the true line hands your neighbor a strip of your ground by habit, and a shed or a road creeping over the corner is a fight you inherit the day you sign. Walk the corners yourself and count them. Read the dirt while you dig your drainage holes. When you open that hole for the water test, look at what comes out. The dark, crumbly topsoil on top is the good stuff, the layer that grows a garden and takes a septic trench. Under it, the pale, tight subsoil. You want a good foot or more of the dark before you hit the pale. And if your shovel rings on rock a foot down across the whole flat, understand that rock fights everything. It fights a footing, it fights a septic trench, and it fights the man you will pay to dig them. Look at the timber the place already carries. A piece with its own standing cedar, osage, oak, or locust is a piece that will fence itself and build itself for years, off wood you cut on the ground you own. I will get into cutting your own posts another time. For now, count the good trees. They are money already standing on the land. And the plainest advice on the whole walk is this: go back a second time alone with the agent left at the office. A man selling you something fills every quiet second with talk. Walk it by yourself, in the wet, in no hurry, and let the ground get a word in. It has plenty to say once the salesman stops talking over it. If you walk the water piece with me, you already know the ground draws you a map of where the good water sits. This same slow walk reads the other half of that map, where the bad ground sits and where the water you do not want comes looking for your house. Now I will tell you where this walk stops, because a man who only sells you the confident half is doing you wrong. One walk in one season can fool you. A dry year makes swamp ground look like a garden, and a wet year makes fine ground look like a bog. Where you can, walk a piece more than once, in more than one season, before you commit. And I have been fooled by it. I stood on a piece in a hard drought, where every low spot drained clean and firm and lovely, and I talked myself halfway into it. Before I caught myself and remembered I was reading it on the 1 month a year, it looked its best. The ground was honest. The season was the liar. So where waiting on the seasons is a luxury you lack, you lean harder on the digging, the hole that fills with water, the perc pit, the thumb pushed into the low corner. Those tell you the truth in any weather, because you are making the ground show its hand instead of waiting on the sky. Pack for it, too. Take a shovel or a post hole digger, a pair of rubber boots, and a jug of water for the drain test. Walk the boundary all the way around, low side last. An hour of that on a wet gray day is the cheapest inspection money can buy, and you are the one holding the shovel. The realtor keeps his job through all of this. You just walk onto that pretty flat knowing exactly what to look for, instead of walking on knowing only that it is pretty. None of this takes a degree, an inspector, or a dime. It takes a shovel, a pair of rubber boots, and the willingness to be uncomfortable for 1 gray hour. The land will pay you back that hour 1,000 times over in the mistake you did not make. 60 seconds of honest, muddy walking will tell you more about a piece of ground than every photo in the listing stacked on top of each other. So before you sign for any piece of rural ground, go back to it and pick the worst day on the calendar, the gray one, right after a hard rain. Walk it low, walk it slow. Put your boot in the flat and watch the print fill. Stand in the low corner, dig the hole, cross the crossing, read the dirt that comes up on your shovel. The ground has been waiting a long time for somebody to walk it slow and ask it the right questions. So be that somebody before you sign and long before you build. Then, come tell me the prettiest piece you ever walked away from and what the ground turned out to be hiding under all that green. I read every one. The land already drew you the map.